Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport. Watch every Munster and Leinster game only on the Air Sport pack. Visit airsport.ie.
Keith Wood and Matt Williams are with us as Ireland prepare for their final autumn international against USA on Saturday in Dublin, 6:30. But still, I'm sure, enjoying the afterglow of the weekend just gone. Matt, you weren't so confident last week. So what did Ireland do that you weren't quite expecting?
Joe, let me say I'm absolutely delighted to have been wrong. I was shouting and jumping and screaming, and I think at a certain point I just said out loud, I was sitting here with a family and just said, they're going to do this. My God, they're going to do it. And to me it was based on just absolutely sensational defence. I've been critical of their defence in the past, as rightly been so. They leaked a lot of tries in last year's Six Nations, but their spacing and their line speed was truly remarkable. The Lions did this against New Zealand in the second test, and Andy Farrell, of course, was the defensive coach for Ireland and the Lions, and he got that line speed again. The other remarkable part of that was they kept that going for the full 80 minutes. Their fitness was extraordinary. I kept waiting for Ireland to just at some point break, and they didn't. You know, the memorable things, Devon Toner coming off the line and absolutely putting a bell ringer on Brody Retallick, and seeing the look, not of pain on Retallick's face, but of complete amazement that someone is capable of coming out, belting him, picking him up and driving him backwards. I don't think that's ever happened to him. And to keep New Zealand to 0 tries, which I believe, now I haven't checked this stat out, but I am told it's the first time since 1995 that New Zealand haven't scored a try. That tells you, that means the whole professional era, this is the first time they've been held to 0 tries. Certainly against extraordinary effort.
Certainly against the Northern Hemisphere team. I'm not quite sure if it's true of the Southern Hemisphere as well, but it's still a fairly big achievement.
Yeah, I certainly have no memory of it, but either way, that's a side stat, if you like, off somewhere else. It was truly a remarkable defensive display, and I also have to say there was great thought in the offence. You know, they scored an absolutely brilliant try off set play, and what they did, it's what we call a coach's try, because the video analysts have found something, and that was that Mackenzie was starting way out of position over on the left-hand side of the field behind his outside centre off a line-out, and they pulled a very old-fashioned switch play. It wasn't a new play, but it was a very smart play, and got down the sideline there. And what makes it even more painful for the Kiwis is that they did exactly the same thing to Australia. I think it was in the test in Japan. It may have been the second test, but I think it was the third test in Japan off a scrum, where the Australians did the same thing and they switched and went down the short side, and I think Bowden Barrett scored. But it just means they've done their homework. They've identified areas of weakness, and they had a real go at it. It was just brave and wonderful, and on a very serious point, Joe, a game to truly be celebrated. You know, it is worthwhile even 3 or 4 days later to spend time on it, because it was a remarkable achievement, and can well spur this team on to further remarkable achievements, because they are certainly capable of a lot more.
It was great to see a game which was billed so widely and so highly live up to expectations. Interestingly, you're saying that the move is not necessarily a new one. Even Gordon Darcy today in the Irish Times, he was saying it's been in the Leinster playbook since Joe landed in 2010. I remember using it in Montpellier in 2011, me being the Bundy reverse runner who needs to throw the flat pass. So it has been around for a fair while. Worked brilliantly at just the right moment as well. Keith, an amazing game, an amazing Irish performance.
Fantastic game. About as, I'd say, comprehensive as we've played, and to see New Zealand look a bit lost. They were lost the previous week against England. The 20-25 minutes that England played had them totally shell-shocked. That seemed to continue for 60, 65 minutes, New Zealand got on top for a little while, but couldn't make it happen for scores, for real scores, for tries that they were so eagerly looking for. I just thought it was fantastic. I was confident, then got nervous, then was kind of confident again. And one of the great things about it, and this sounds like a negative and it isn't, is we made mistakes. And in the midst of the game, we made mistakes, and yet we were able to cover ourselves. We were able to dig ourselves out of a hole. We got into a little bit of a funk with the lineouts in the second half, but it didn't derail us. It's one of those days for sport, I have to say. I just thought it was amazing. I loved it. And Matty mentioned the defence, but actually I thought we played incredibly smartly. We outplayed them. We looked the better team on the day, and a lot of times in the past we may have had better periods of play than the All Blacks and haven't been able to kind of push it on. But I thought the leadership on the field at the end of the game, I thought the subs that had come on made for a truly extraordinary day.
It's interesting when you say you think Ireland outsmarted New Zealand. So what kind of things are you talking about there?
I think the defensive manner in which we played, Beauden Barrett is, for me, he's one of the great pleasures to watch in World Rugby. Mm-hmm. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's got great gas. His decision making is phenomenal. You'll often hear me say it. He plays it late and is able to see how things open up in front of him. Nothing opened up in front of him. He looked harassed for the whole time. So the defensive structure that Ireland had in the game had him wondering where to go. Mm. And I felt that an awful lot of those New Zealand players were not used to being put under that level of pressure consistently for a long period of time. Mm. I think South Africa put them under pressure during the year. England put them under pressure. The Lions most definitely put them under pressure. And I think they're shook a little because what they've traditionally been able to hold out for is that actually they may only get one or two chances, but they'll take them. Mm. They had one chance and they didn't take it. And it would have been highway robbery if they'd managed to get out of that game with a win, because Ireland were just comprehensively better so often. Mm. We don't try as much as New Zealand, but what we did try, we pretty much executed very, very well. And look, I'm still little bits critical of Stockdale because he's, critical and then want to put an arm around his shoulder and saying, my God, this guy is learning to play rugby at the highest level and delivering at the highest level. And he made a couple of mistakes. I love it when you see a young guy, make a mistake and still feel, do you know what, I don't need to make the steps on the ladder to get my confidence back. I can go and deliver on it. That finish was phenomenal. Perfectly well orchestrated training ground play as described. You always have those in your locker. You don't bring them out all that often. They might get brought out once a year. And that's brilliant coaching and brilliant implementation by the players. I mean, I just thought it's just a pure pleasure to watch. It was as intense a game of rugby as you're ever going to see. And when people say, well, why do people love that game? They love that game because you can see the effort. It's just in front of everybody to see how hard it was, how much each of the Irish players and New Zealand players had to dip into the well to try and perform for that period of time. I just thought it was a monumental contest, and we came out on top, which is kind of cool.
And rare. Steve Hansen made a point that I put to Eddie and Brian on Monday night. Matt, I might get your thoughts on where they are, because Keith says he thinks they're a little bit shook at the moment. Hansen was arguing that we've tried to change how we want to play and we're still stuck between the old way and the new way. We haven't got it right just yet. He says when we get it right, we'll see some big improvements. What's he talking about there?
I got no idea. Look, I think the big thing that's happened for New Zealand, and it's the first time in probably 10 or 12 years, is pretty much what Keith said. Teams are figuring out you can shut them down. And no one's been able to shut down New Zealand effectively for a long, long, long time. and that's the line speed. If you can come up, and what they've done, the way they attack, the attacking system that everyone slavishly copies, which I totally disagree with the copying, I think it's a good system for the Kiwis, is they leave a flanker on one side, the hooker on another, right on the extremities next to the winger, and the other forwards play in the middle. And they allow their wingers, their out half, and their centres to really snap around, fullback to snap around left or right, depending where there's an overlap. But that only works if you can get 3 or 4 passes in. And if you get 3 or 4 passes in, it's a highly effective system of attack. But with the defenders racing up, blocking off the New Zealand first receiver, and certainly the second receiver, the first receiver to get that pass away, it shuts down their attacking system. And they really, when teams have done that to them, they haven't really come up with a great answer. Now, it's very, very hard to play against defence like that. And I mean, there's another conversation to be had here about the yin and the yang of international rugby, where it's now favouring the defence. And I watched every game on the weekend. I had a binge on it and sat down and watched a lot of rugby. And in every game, every team was offside. So I'm not suggesting Ireland were offside. Every team in every game were offside. And that favours that shutting down of the attack. Now, if they're trying to change their attacking shape by allowing the forwards to take it a little bit more up the middle, again, it was just shut down. So perhaps Steve is saying they've had this wide attack and people are learning how to stop it, so we're going to have to change the way we attack. But right now, it's certainly not working. It didn't work against England, and it didn't work against Ireland. Now, it did work in the South. To be fair, they scored a lot of points. When they lost to South Africa, as we said last week, Barrett missed 5 goals. If Barrett had kicked 2 of those, they would have won. So they're sort of, and Steve would obviously know his team better than anyone, but they're not playing at the level that they were playing at 12 months ago. There's very, very little. There's no doubt of that. They are still playing at a great level. Yeah, they are. Like, Ireland had to go to a place they'd never been. I was speaking to Woody about this. I talked to a few of the old Wallabies back in Australia. I mean, the guys that played in the 80s and the 70s. When they beat New Zealand, they said they physically did things that they couldn't believe they had to do and did. In other words, New Zealand brought out of them a performance that was beyond what they'd imagined they could do. And they did it individually and collectively, and they beat New Zealand. New Zealand did that to Ireland the other night. The Irish performance was of an extraordinary level. And even though New Zealand aren't where they were, I don't think we should joke or kid ourselves that they're still not brilliant. They are brilliant.
Yeah.
But the more brilliance to Ireland, because I agree with Keith, it would have been a travesty if Ireland had lost that game, because they were better than New Zealand in every single aspect. It wasn't a perfect Irish performance. There were still aspects they can get better at. But it was still a performance of immense magnitude by Ireland, catching New Zealand at a lower point of their very, very high standards.
There's Heineken Star comments coming in. We are Facebook. We are streaming on Facebook. I'll get to those in just a second. But on the points you've just made there, Maddie, with a view to the World Cup, because there's been plenty of discussion here about whether or not we're losing the run of ourselves and whether we think we can win the World Cup or whether we think we can't or whether we're realistic. And it's been kind of relentless, the talk over the last number of days. You'd kind of back New Zealand to reimagine themselves over the next 11 months and come out with something pretty impressive come World Cup time, or would you be slightly worried on their behalf?
Well, let me put it this way: if New Zealand lose the next World Cup, it will be one of the great things for world rugby. Rugby does not need New Zealand to win the next World Cup. That would be bad for us. Everyone that's not a New Zealander accepts that, because it's just not healthy for the game for them to win 3 World Cups in a row. So, but in the same breath, do not doubt that they will be the team to beat at the World Cup. Do not doubt that. They will be the team to beat. I certainly hope that they are not, that they are where they are now, which is beatable. They are beatable as in this season. Australia pushed them, and Australia this is not a very, very good Wallaby side by any stretch of the imagination. But if we spin that out another little part, why would they not have a shot of it? What is it that the people have got against saying, well, we're not losing we're not bragging, we're not carrying on like pork chops here, but you know what? I really believe we can have a go at this.
Yeah, I thought you thought we were losing to one of ourselves last week when we spoke. No,
I felt last week. This is the crazy part. This is the crazy part that I love about being Irish. This is the same everywhere in the world. Last week everyone goes, "We're going to beat New Zealand. We're going to beat New Zealand." I'm going, "Hang on, boys. This is a really good side. You're going to have to do something you've never done before to beat New Zealand." Yeah. They go and do something they've never done before, and I say, "Listen, you've got a shot at the World Cup." "Oh, don't be stupid. We have not." I'm going to leave that to Woody. I'm out of that one.
Yeah.
That's up to him. I'll let the Killaloo boys sort that one out.
Well, I'll Keith, come in on this point. What Joe Schmidt said, incidentally, I mean, I suppose there's everybody who has an opinion on what the ramifications of this win for Ireland are now, what it means. Schmidt said, like, you could deliver that same level of performance again against New Zealand and they could well beat you because 3 of the chances that they created, they might take 1 or 2 of them. He said, however, you know you're in the ballpark and now you know you can foot it with the big boys when you can eke your way through an arm wrestle like that. So maybe that's as far as we can go in terms of the ramifications for a win like that, is that they know they can beat them, and that's something for sure.
I think we're entitled to go mad and lose the run of ourselves entirely. I don't think the team are.
Sure.
And I also think we have to celebrate the fact that we did what we've never done before. And I don't think there's anything wrong in a few days afterwards still feeling a bit of a warm glow for the fact that Ireland have fully delivered and beaten the All Blacks twice in a few years is pretty impressive, having never done it in our history. So one of the elements of the journey, and every part of sport is a journey, life too, mind you, but is you have to enjoy and celebrate the successes along the way. If you just say, yeah, that's it, let's push it aside, let's not enjoy that, I think you're missing out on some of it. And I do feel for us, you're dead right, we should lose the run of ourselves. Saturday was a reason to lose the run of yourself. But there was another comment, I think it came out from Joe Schmidt, was that this is just a day, a moment in time, when these things have aligned and Ireland have been able to go and do it. So it doesn't lead on to say that, like, if at some stage in the Six Nations we may become the top team in the world, which could happen because New Zealand aren't playing and we are playing, and if we play away from home, this could happen. We're then guaranteed to go and win the World Cup. Well, obviously, that's rubbish. So the point is that, yes, we can. We've set a standard that is pretty damn impressive. And the onus on us is to try and make certain that we set that standard and improve it every time we go out and play. And it won't happen all the time. So this is a one-off game. And for that one-off game, it's phenomenal. And just a joy to be an Irish rugby fan. I love the idea of Six Nations. I love that having won a Grand Slam and gone through all those games and winning them all. Because Ireland pretty much have to go to a World Cup and win all their games. And that is something we haven't been able to do before. So I don't think there'll be any resting on the laurels. And I do think the players will have to love what they've done. But it doesn't lead to say, well, because of that, we then go and win the World Cup. But I would agree with Matty. It's not a very Irish sentiment, but I do think you have to dream of winning a World Cup. I do think you have to see that you have the capacity to do it. And I think when you look at that squad of players, there's an awful lot of players there who think that they can win a World Cup, but they also know they have to prove it every time they put on the jersey. That's a good place to be.
The voices of Keith Wood and Matt Williams. Rugby here and Off the Ball is with thanks to Air Sport, the home of rugby in Ireland. And there are Heineken Star comments coming in. So Eamon Doherty on Facebook: has Johnny Sexton rubber stamped his name now as world's best player? He wonders. Matt, we had Brian O'Driscoll in here on Monday. He said he'd certainly be voting for him.
I hate these selection processes because there's always other people that are around you. Look, I thought Johnny was fantastic. I think Beauden Barrett's had an absolutely staggering season as well. There's a couple of those guys you couldn't argue with. It'd be really nice to see Johnny get it. But I think Barrett is equally deserving. If Barrett got it, you couldn't argue. I'd be disappointed for Johnny, and if Johnny got it, Barrett would feel that it was a tough call because they both had just stellar seasons. Absolutely,
make the case for Barrett there, Matt, because we've all seen Johnny Sexton up close.
Different players, different type of players. You saw Barrett drop that goal. There was an advantage given to New Zealand. He drops the goal from 35 out. 40 out, and against South Africa when they lost, he had probably 5 or 6 opportunities to take a drop goal from 15 out, and he didn't. He ran the ball, and he got a fair bit of criticism for that.
Yeah.
So he just drops that ball over, and you see him running back. He just giggles. You see him look around and have a laugh. Someone said something to him. He's laughed.
You know, funny enough, the flip side interpretation of that could be he had the penalty advantage. He should have actually tried to do something more ambitious, and he just is so unsure of his kicking that he decided, I'll take my 2 bites at this cherry. That could be a more unfair interpretation. But anyway, look, his kicking is suspect.
Well, he missed 5 here and there, but mate, look, he's just superbly athletic. His speed, his vision. He plays the game at 10 like, you know, I've got to go back before Woody there. You know, my year was Mark Ellegy. He's the greatest player I've ever seen or played against or seen. I've seen videos of the great Barry John playing for Wales in the 60s. They're the only 3 guys that I've ever seen play 10 like that. He just plays it in a way that is remarkable. He creates space that's not there, and even on Saturday night he just got caught. Like, we just got him by the last centimetres, and he's done that all year.
Yeah.
And one game's left, right and centre. Look, and there's not suggesting that Johnny is not deserving or is not a great player. The way he drives the team around, his kicking game, his intensity, his passing game is superb, his vision is superb, you know, his self-belief and his achievements. But they're both great players, but different types of players, and both, in my opinion, would be worthy winners. Yeah,
it's kind of tricky. You don't want to talk down one to make the case for the other.
No, it's certainly not trying to talk down Johnny in any way. For him personally, knowing him and I think it would be a wonderful thing for him. And Barrett's he was already one of the sort of guy. He's just a very different character too. You know, Johnny's highly intense and Bud's very laid back and very much an extrovert. You know, it's just a different way of approaching the game.
Porrick Dillon, one for you, Keith. Thoughts on James Ryan being one of the best locks in the world at his age? It is a bit nuts what James Ryan is doing, Keith.
I just think I use phenomenal too. I'm running out of words. Setting for me. I think his level of performance is and has been incredible, and I just thought he was extraordinary again on the weekend. I thought a lot of players were extraordinary. That's one of the elements that I'm not detracting from James Ryan. Sure. I just thought so many players came up there, and even though we're talking about, you were just talking about Johnny Sexton, and in terms of that for World Player of the Year. There could have been other Irish players on it, and I just don't want to get into that. We were only seeing the Irish guys so much, and we kind of besotted with them, and we really want them to do well. I thought Tadhg Furlong could have been there. I thought Conor Murray could have been there.
Well, he's the Olympic Player of the Year, so it's not.
And we tend to get kind of caught up into what's happened in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
So I think you could have even James Ryan in there, but there's no way you're going to have 4 or 5 Irish guys.
Yeah. Would James Ryan be a starting line in the morning?
Yes. Yeah, in a heartbeat. And we were talking about it 2 weeks ago, and I was disagreeing, I think, with Eddie O'Sullivan. He's saying the first guy that you'll pick is Devon Toner, and I'm a big Devon Toner fan, and I thought he had a great game on Saturday. But you build teams around people like James Ryan. And so, yes, I would say, and I don't like kind of going that, you say for the future ones, but if it was tomorrow, yes. But I would have had Tadhg Furlong in the shortlist, and I would have had Conor Murray. I think Conor's injury may have gotten away from it. But if you're to talk about Johnny Sexton, I could go back to Johnny Sexton again. He would not suit every team. We just mentioned there that he's very different from Beauden Barrett. But he is a guy that suits Ireland perfectly, suits the coach perfectly. And his level of consistency in the 12-month period has been just incredible. So for all of those elements, what you're looking for is a standard that's over and above. And I think he has won everything this year. And I think Beauden Barrett is a far more, I'm going to say, easy on the eye player. He's more exciting. He's more flamboyant. I think he has had a fairly significant hiccups during this year, even though he's been brilliant, and he is brilliant. But for me, it's Johnny Sexton all day long. Has to be.
This weekend, to mark people's card, Italy, New Zealand. Interesting to see how they approach that one. 2 o'clock. We have Scotland against Argentina at 2:30. England, Australia is at 3 o'clock at Twickenham. To be followed by the England women against the Irish women. The Irish women were beaten 19-10 at the weekend just gone by the USA. And England against USA a fortnight ago beat them 57-5. So it's fair to say Ireland are up against it at Twickenham at 5:40. Which follows England, Australia at Twickenham. Wales, South Africa, worth looking out for 5:20. Ireland, USA kicks off at 6:30. And then France, Fiji is at 8:05. And you may have seen the French are all going to wear rainbow laces in support of Gareth Thomas, who suffered a homophobic assault in Cardiff at the weekend, which was eye-catching story in many respects. So that's the weekend. 43 players have been in a Carton House over the last couple of weeks, lads. 31 will go to Japan. So obviously there'll be plenty of disappointment around the place. USA, they are in very good form by their own standards. Their highest ever ranking, they're 13th in the world. They've won all 9 of their tests so far in 2018. Sean Cronin, Jack McGrath, Rob Kearney, James Ryan, Jordan Larmour, all back with their provinces. Kieran Marmion out with injury. So Joe Schmidt doesn't have a huge number of games, really, that he can tinker with and play around with between now and the World Cup. So USA come on Saturday. What are you looking out for, Maddie? Is there anyone in particular, or is it more of a general thing? Or frankly, is this just not very important ultimately when it comes down to it?
No, I think on a couple of fronts, Joe, I think it's a highly interesting game. Yeah. In the States, they've just started a thing called the MLR, which is Major League Rugby. They finished their first season, and it's really they've attempted professional rugby a couple of times, and it's failed. It's fallen over financially, and this looks like it's got a model that's sustainable. They're introducing another couple of teams this year and another couple next year. And they're going to try and up around the 12 mark is the talk across the states, which is obviously a massive geographical exercise to logistical exercise around the geography rather. But you will see an improvement from the Americans. But also, I think for everyone, the rugby people, just keep an eye on this. In the next World Cup cycle, I think you're going to see a significant improvement in the Americans. So just from a rugby point of view, I think that's quite fascinating in how they're going about it. On the Irish point of view, look, to me, we've just got to give that second tier of Porter, a Joey, and the next back rowers, Byrne at second row, all these guys deserve and must be given some time in their positions. And that's a very powerful thing, because you go to a World Cup and you as Keith said, you've got 31 players, but these other guys, they're going to be hugely important next year, and they've got to get time. We've got to give them time. We've had this discussion before. In the old days, when you went on tour, you had a Saturday-Wednesday fixture, and your test team would play the Saturday, and your Wednesdays, your dirt trackers, as they used to be called, the Double Dirties. Sometimes that was where you put your kids, and your kids could fail and make a mistake, and they'd learn from it and grow for the next Wednesday. We don't have that anymore. So you've got to get these games, like when you play the Tier 2 countries like America and Georgia and so on, and give your guys the opportunity to go out there with a safety net around them and say, look, it's okay if you fail. It's okay if you make a mistake. Get up and keep going again. And Joey Carberry especially, that's what he needs. He just needs time in the saddle. So I think this is a really important game in the big picture. It mightn't be an important game in the real short term of things, but I think on both sides of the fence for the Eagles and for Ireland, I think it's a really a game that we'll learn a lot from about the Irish boys, and a game that I think will help the Americans grow as well.
The Double Dirties. I feel like you and Keith should be in a band called the Double Dirties. Hoddle and Waddle touring.
Double Dirties, yeah. You were a dirt tracker, and you were dirty that you weren't in the starting team, so you were a double dirty.
Keith Wood and Matt Williams, the Double Dirties. Matt,
Good
Keith.
God. Good God. The Aussies have a great way of phrasing things, don't they? Yeah, the dirt trackers were always part and parcel of it. It was amazing how that was the occasion for the guys that didn't have experience to get into the test team. Yeah. Was the midweek match. It always was, yeah. But I think it is an important game at the weekend, actually, because I think all the guys that want to be on that plane have a limited amount of games under which they can go and play. And it isn't individual stuff. It is about how they can because if things were done in the past on an individual basis, fine. Under Joe Schmidt, it's been how do they function within the team? How do they go and deliver what he has set out for them? And that's what he will want to see again. So that's what happens this weekend. So everybody else will get a little bit antsy and want to see early scores and want to see them put to the sword. It is about trying to play properly. It's not barbarians rugby.
Yeah, okay, fair point. So that's 6:30 on Saturday. And there's provincial rugby on as well to mark people's card. It's back. So we have Friday night Leinster against Ospreys. That's 7:35 kickoff. That's on Air Sport 1. Scarlets Ulster 7:35 on Air Sport 2. And then Sunday, Southern Kings against Connacht 3 o'clock on Air Sport 2, and Zebre against Munster 4 o'clock kickoff on Air Sport 1. Bit of a come down going back, Keith, for these kind of games for the frontliners. I guess most of the frontliners are going to have their feet up for a week or two yet.
Yeah, it kind of makes it very hard because I wasn't even certain those games were on this weekend. So my brain has been elsewhere entirely. But those guys aren't. And the guys that have been on the high and come back in again, they might get a start and shouldn't be going on those games at all. But I think that's the difference in what's happened in Irish rugby over the last 10 or 15 years, actually. These guys that are there have a responsibility to the teammates that have been away to play, that they pick up the maximum points while they've been away. They also want to get their opportunity to get further up the pecking order. So they become very important. They still need a huge amount of support. You know, it's hard. It's hard for us, I think, because we're on an unbelievable high on the back of it. So, but those guys, it's their job. It's what they have to do. Yeah.
Matt, I'm sure you'll be watching Australia against England finally, 3 o'clock in Twickenham. I think there's a bit of an illness in the camp. I think Pocock's out, maybe one or two others. They're in a bit of trouble. Can they muster up something and put Eddie Jones back under a bit of pressure, or how's that shaping up, that one?
Oh, they're playing with absolutely zero confidence at the moment. Right. Pocock actually, I believe, has a neck injury, and Falau and Foley were sick with a lot of other guys, some staff members as well. Yeah. The talk is, I talked to one of the boys just on a text, just sort of said thought they'd all make it, but you're just not sure of that. But I was talking with a couple of Australians here. We've got a guy called Craig McMullen who's played with the Brumbies and the Waratahs, and he sort of went through that Australian side individually, and you look at it, he said, you know, that's still a pretty good side. They're just not playing with any cohesion. They're making so many errors, giving away so many penalties, and with no confidence. Right. So, you know, can they beat England? Yeah, well, they could. They're just a long way off their best at the moment. It's the last game in a long, long season. They've been sick. You know, everything's stacked against them, but that's probably the time where they do stand up the most. They always love playing against England. It's a game that they do really enjoy coming to play. But you'd have to say, I think, right now in the state that Australian rugby's in, and the state the Wallabies in, unfortunately, I think England might win that one, which will be very hard for the team and very hard for Michael Checker and Eddie Jones, who are teammates at Randwick together. Checker will be doing something he hates, which is buying beers. You know, he'll be doing that after the game.
Is Checker under pressure, Matty?
He is, Keith. He fronted the ARU board after the championship and had to present his case, and they backed him, but they did say he had to win all the games over here. Now he's obviously lost one already to Wales. I think it's very short-sighted because really there's no one in the wings that we would say, oh, look, you know, Michael, he should take over from Michael. And Michael's had a very good 4 years. The team has played pretty well. We haven't won a Bledisloe Cup, but they've been up there and batting at the top. He's got them to a World Cup final. I think it's one of those real short-sighted, media-driven pressure conversations rather than one based on logic and rugby.
Okay. Lads, believe there. We'll watch that game closely. Next games after that will be Ireland-England, first round of the Six Nations. So that'll come around quicker than we all expect. Matt Williams, Keith Wood, thanks very much, gents.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Woody.
Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball
with Air Sport. Watch every Munster and Leinster game only on the Air Sport pack. Visit airsport.ie.